So a couple days ago during a live stream, one of Royale High's developers made a comment talking about how they understand players want the old Masc body back, but it's just not a priority right now. And this leads into a much bigger issue with the Royale High community where masculine or non-binary bodies aren't accurately represented in the game and players aren't really listened to, and I want to take a minute to talk about this in this video, particularly the comment by this developer, the developer's response to that comment being posted, and the community's response to that comment being posted on Twitter, because I can guarantee you people are not happy about this, and rightfully so. And I do want to clarify before we get into it, this is not meant to send hate or harassment to anybody involved, especially not the developer. At the end of the day, the developer doesn't make the final decisions of the game as to what is a priority, what isn't. They were obviously just trying to clear up some miscommunications, but unfortunately, the way this comment was worded made some people upset, and that's to no fault of the developer in my opinion. This is just, what they were told, and they're just telling people what they've been told, so honestly, not demonizing them for that. I think that's not their fault. Now, masculine bodies have been an issue in Royale High for a while now, and the original masculine body was rewritten or redone into a different masculine body, which a lot of players have said just doesn't accurately represent masculine bodies in Royale High, and they are not happy with that body type. There's been a lot of people who've talked about this on Twitter and videos, and Royale High hadn't really said anything about it, so people just assume maybe they didn't know, but with this comment coming out, it's clear that Royale High knows, and that they just, for lack of better terms, in my opinion, don't care. And this is something that I mentioned in a previous video, that Royale High is a game, in my opinion, that is known that if they don't necessarily get financial reward for something, there's no incentive to do that update or to do that. And this, in my opinion, reinforces that notion. So getting straight into it, this comment was posted by Tiana, and it reads, "A tag for the developer confirms that the old masculine body will not be brought back due to a problem with compatibility. Picture found from," and the site where they found it from. And this screenshot reads, "The old Masc body has a problem with compatibility. Bringing that back would mean going to every single new item /set /accessories /shoes and resizing every single item for it to be compatible. There are other things that currently have priority like gameplay, seasonal updates, and campus development." So the way I understand this is, in order for clothing assets to fit on a 3D model, you have to size them appropriately so that they can fit on the torso, the head, the feet, stuff like that. And I understand that. That makes sense. And I'm not trying to undermine the effort that goes into, obviously editing items. I'm sure it's a lot of work and it takes a lot of effort, and I've personally never done it, but I'm not going to sit here and say that it's easy because I really don't think it is. Now, my issue here is the end of the sentence where they talk about there are other things that currently have priority like gameplay, seasonal updates, and campus development. And what do all of those things have in common? Those are all things that directly make Royale High money. When Royale High releases a gameplay update or a seasonal update or a campus development update, there's a sudden influx of players, which in turn gives them more money. And this is something I talked about in my last video, and the Royale High Twitter community was not happy about it, but unfortunately I feel like this reinforces that concept. If a game is not directly making money or benefiting financially from something, there really isn't a lot of incentive to apply it, even if it's the right thing to do. Now, this developer made a comment, replying to the situation, and it said, "Hello friend, I never confirmed anything. As I said in another comment, I'll post it here." And they post what they said in another comment. Mainly, I just explained to a viewer that as of right now, we're prioritizing gameplay, seasonal updates, and campus development. Going back to rework every single item for it to potentially fit the body would take rather too long and be counterproductive, especially since there's been mentions of a scaling system. Which this developer obviously responded very politely to this tweet being posted, and I'm sure they probably got some hate for this tweet coming out and people not being happy with it, which inherently, again, it's not this developer's fault that this is the case and what Royale High has prioritized. That's up to the owners of the game, I'm sure, so no hate to this person. But I definitely do think this reinforces the notion that because it's not inherently profitable, Royale High doesn't want to prioritize it. And I understand players want updates to the game, and they want the campus to be developed, and they want stuff to be done, and I get that. Obviously, that's how you keep a player base interested in your game. That makes sense. But in my opinion, I think it's unfortunate to completely disregard players' feelings when it comes to a game that is reliant on players playing it to make money and just being like, yeah, nah, we're gonna do this instead. It's just, it comes across disingenuous in my opinion, and it's hurtful to the wider community. And I've seen a lot of people spread the narrative that, oh, well, Royale High's for girls anyways, who cares? And I'm not trying to sit here and be super woke or anything like that, but in 2025, to say that a game is solely for girls is a harmful thing to say. There are a lot of men who play Royale High, first of all, and second of all, masculine bodies aren't just reserved for males. Same with feminine bodies. They aren't just reserved for people who are biologically female, people who are maybe androgynous, people who are non-binary, and people who maybe just want to present in a masculine way. Those are all people that will utilize the masculine body. And I think to present it as, well, just because they're like a minority in the game, there's less male players in the game, means it doesn't matter. Who cares? And I think that spreads a really harmful rhetoric that is very damaging to the larger Royale High community. Now, with this specific comment, the developer does mention a scaling system, which I think is great, and I think that's going to be a really great addition to Royale High. My question, however, is the scaling system coming anytime soon? Because we know from history of Royale High updates that they'll typically say, oh yeah, new campus coming, and then years later the campus will come out. Which I'm not saying that that's, terrible and oh, shame on you for taking so long. What I'm saying is, if this scaling system is going to take years to come out, or even just a year to come out, I feel like in the meantime, the least you can do is bring back a body type that players identify with and take the time to properly scale the items for that body type. I understand it's a lot of work, but I think it really comes down to how much do you value the masculine presenting portion of your game. Obviously not every person who uses a Masc body doesn't like the new body type, but there is a large portion of players who feel like they aren't being represented, who feel like they're being overlooked and they're being, pushed under the rug, and I think that's really harmful to the game's reputation. It also tells players, hey, because you're not the majority of the players who play our game, we don't care. And that's how I perceive it. And maybe people perceive it differently, you never know, this is obviously just my opinion, but I feel like it comes across that because you aren't inherently our target audience, you don't matter. And I think that's really, really harmful. And again, to no fault of this developer, obviously it's not this developer's choice to choose what to prioritize and what not to prioritize, they just work for the game. But at the same time, I feel like I would really appreciate if the game came out and said something about this, because again, if the scaling system's coming out sometime soon, totally understandable that you wouldn't resize all the items, because it just doesn't make sense. If the scaling system isn't coming out for a long time, I think it makes total sense to hire somebody or outsource the work for somebody to manually resize the items to show the community that you care about, even if it's minority portion of the community, that you care about players who want to present in a masculine way in the game. Now, aside from that, there's some other comments. This one reads, why did they change it in the first place? Then they wouldn't have had to go back and readjust the newer items. They could have just kept going with the model they already had. I'm so confused. Now, I'm gonna be honest, there's multiple varying narratives of why they changed what they changed. I guess some people didn't like the old body type, which, to be fair, there's never gonna be anybody that's happy with anything. You're never gonna be able to please everybody, and I understand what a tiring process it is to try and make people happy and try to understand the community and just constantly have negative backlash. I get that, right? And I'm sure even if they did go ahead and change this Masc body type, that wouldn't change or stop people from leaving negative comments anyways. At the end of the day, that's the internet and it sucks, and I have firsthand experience with that. It's hurtful, I get it, right? But what, I think is confusing to me is that it's just kind of like this narrative that, oh, well, we changed this body type, and so we're not willing to re-add it or to adjust items because it's way too much work. Which, again, I understand it's a lot of work, but I feel like if you can put in the work into making a new map, you can put in the work to releasing seasonal updates and bringing back Wickery Cliffs and doing a whole mermaid thing, which is a whole new feature that was added to the game, I feel like you can outsource or pay somebody or have someone on the development team spend the time to make sure that these assets fit these body types to accurately represent a portion of your community. Because at the end of the day, no matter how small that portion is, they are still part of your community, and it's important that they feel represented, right? This person writes, well then fix the Masc bodies. Can they at least say something about it? They could say it's in the works or literally anything, like people are upset. And I think that's another thing too, is Royale High has a track record, in my opinion, of not being very transparent and not communicating. And I certainly feel that their community manager or social media manager on Twitter has done a fabulous job at, kind of fixing some of that community mistrust and, making players feel heard. And they're actually really funny. And I really admire the person who runs the Royale High Twitter account because they have a really deep understanding of how to connect with the community. So absolutely no hate to this person. But I feel like, to a degree, especially from the development side, there's a real lack of just communication, open transparency with the community about what's going on with the game. And so when players are complaining about something and they don't feel heard, do you think they're just going to stop talking about it? No, they're just going to be louder. They're going to mention it more. And that leaves players with the impression that, in my opinion, Royale High is just trying to ignore it and sweep it under the rug and act like it doesn't matter, when in reality, Royale High could really care. But if you're not telling the community that you care and you hear them, they're just going to get more upset, and it just creates a whole circle of negative energy where nobody feels properly heard. This person writes, and who set that system up, which is kind of funny. This person writes, so basically, in other words, they care more about Christmas and Halloween more than male players. Oh, okay. And, this is kind of how I've personally have interpreted it as well. I do want to say, though, here, male players, I would rather say Masc presenting players or just non-binary players, because, again, not to be too woke or too, judgy or anything like that, not to overly correct people, but masculine bodies are a lot more than just meant for masculine individuals or male individuals. It's used for a variety of reasons, for a variety of different people, for role-playing, for people who are androgynous, for people who are, non-binary, for people who maybe just want to present masculine and are female. Maybe they just want to show a masculine body sometimes. And so I think it shows that, hey, we just don't care about, in my opinion, male representation or how the community feels about male representation in the game. This person writes, or they could add an accessory move such as adjustability by axis tool, which could also enhance the Royale High as it's fundamental a dress-up game. And I think this is what the developer was mentioning when they said a scaling system. I think that's what they're referencing. This person says they should consider having a team for that body type specifically, that they can have the male items ready for the current body, but then send the model to another team to resize it to the old masculine package, which I 100% agree with. I know it's a lot easier said than done to just hire people and just have it done, because that costs money. Everything costs money. It's a lot of work. Time is money. Time is valuable, and I get that time is limited. So I'm not trying to sit here and be like, you have to do this. Like, I'm not trying to sit here and be delusional and act like this is an easy feat. But, you know, again, I've made this comment in my previous videos, but when you have a toy line, right? It's one of the biggest retailers in the world, Walmart. You are not a small game anymore. You are a famous game, you're making money, and maybe that money isn't necessarily as astronomical as it used to be. You're still making profit, and I feel like in order for Royale High to regain some of their former player base, which anytime I say that Royale High's player base has gone down, people get mad. And babe, graphs don't lie. Okay, look at the numbers. I'm not lying, I'm just reading the graphs, don't shoot the messenger. But that's been an issue with Royale High, is that players have been leaving the game for a while now, and I think primarily it is because of lack of updates, but also because players are aging out of the game. But if they want to attract new players, they have to account for the fact that players want certain aspects that are offered in other games, that are offered in competitor games. And if you can't keep up with those aspects, i.e. having certain different types of male bodies, players are going to choose other games over playing your game, and that's just the truth of it, right? Nobody wants to play a game where they don't feel like they're understood or represented. It's harmful, and it creates a harmful narrative that they aren't important and they aren't valued, in my opinion. And I think that's really unfortunate for kids to be seeing that and seeing that, oh, you know, okay, this is the male body and I don't look like that, or, you know, I don't have that exact body type, or here's a female body and it's super skinny and she has long legs and big hips and I don't look like that, so I guess I'm not the ideal female body. Like, and again, I'm not trying to be super woke, and I understand that certain games are meant to have a certain style, and I get that, but I also feel like there's been so much resistance to making inclusive bodies in this game, and to making and listening to player feedback and just understanding what players want. I don't understand the resistance to it. I just really don't. I know it's hard work, I know it's not as easy as it may sound, and I understand it's going to cost money to do, but I feel like it's worth it in order to show your community that you care. This person says, I honestly don't expect them to go back and change the old new sets, if that makes sense. Just keep those and change future designs, kind of like they're still old Masc plus the new Masc. Which, I understand what this person's trying to say, but if they did this, people would still be mad, so I don't know if that's necessarily a feasible thing, but I understand what they're trying to communicate. This person says maybe in the future they'll bring a new and better one, and I hope so. And if that's the case, I hope they communicate that, because that would be amazing. This person writes, I'm seeing things that are leaving me perplexed. I know it was hard for Barbie to get back into streaming, but the fact that I didn't hear about the main problems, like the body scale, really angers me. And unfortunately, again, I feel like when you're not being transparent with the community and you're not communicating with them, it creates a sense of anger with players, you know, and I don't think any game inherently deserves to get hate, right? I don't think any game deserves to be getting attacked or getting hate comments or having people saying nasty things about it, because words hurt, and regardless of if Barbie is a big developer or not, I'm sure she sees content where people are hating on her game, and I understand how that'd be hurtful because she's put a lot of effort into the game along with the developers and other people who work on it, right? But at the same time, again, it's the lack of communication I think is making people angry, and then when you continuously, in my opinion, fail to address things that people are bringing to your attention, they're like, hey, like, can you just hear me out? Can you just hear me out? And then it's just like, la 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 la. Anyways, so here's Vickery Cliffs. It's like, it's like the meme, it's like from the Croods where it's like, in a minute.
Here, right here. All your needs will be met.
I'm hungry.
In a minute!
That's what I think about in this situation where it's like, they kind of just like ignore, and then here, eat this, have this, that's all you get. Enjoy. And again, I get it's a lot of work, it's a lot easier said than done, but if they were just communicating, I feel like there'd be a lot less sentiments of anger among the community and a lot more of understanding and anticipation and excitement, and it would build hype for the game. This person writes, yes, let's hope they give masculinity to newer sets, items, and add the scaling system, which, yep. And the guy goes, I don't care, bro. They just lazy at this point, ruining the game with the body type, which, I don't know if they're ruining the game. I wouldn't call it laziness either. I think it's just a lack of understanding for how important this is. But I wouldn't call it laziness because I do think they're putting an effort into the game, but I think it's unfair to, you know, not give aspects like this that are really important enough attention. And this person writes, so anything other than this skinny, petite femme body type is not a priority in the eyes of Royale High. And this is what I was referencing before. Again, I understand it's a fantasy game, and not everything is going to be super realistic, and I understand they have some very intricate outfits, and it's obviously a lot of work to scale those different body types, but if other games can do it, you can do it too. And that's not me trying to be nasty, but it's the truth. A lot of games like to use excuse, and I'm not talking about Royale High here, But other games like to use the excuse, oh, it's just not possible. It's just not possible. Well, is it not possible, or are you just not willing to do it? What is the truth here? Because if it wasn't possible, how come this game can do it, but you can't? You know what I mean? And I understand Royale High has so many accessories and it would take a long time, but personally, I feel like, in my opinion, taking the time to do this, I think personally would give Royale High so much social credit and so much positive feedback that they would get an influx of players. And that is just my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but I generally feel like if this game took the time to maybe implement different body sizes or to implement different body types that, you know, are more representative of the wider community and player base that plays their game, that doesn't just solely adhere to hegemonic ideas, which is, if you don't know what that means, is like the status quo of what beauty should be, that you should be skinny, have big hips, have a big chest, and if you're a man, you should have big shoulders, you should be toned. You know, I think if they sided away from that and created a sense where there was an understanding and an equal appreciation for other body types, I genuinely feel like people would play the game more and the game would get a lot more positive feedback, and in turn, a lot more new players would hear about the game. And finally, this last comment reads, just annoying as F, which, I'll be honest, in my opinion, if you don't have anything constructive to say, don't say anything at all, right? I'm not gonna sit here and be like, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Because that's just not the reality of the world. People are always gonna say, you know, negative things, and at the end of the day, I think it can be difficult, but not taking those as a slight towards you, but rather criticism, I think is important. And when you have something to say about a game, if you want it to be taken seriously, you have to word it in one, a respectful, two, an appropriate, and three, a professional manner. Yeah, maybe you're a kid, but you can say, hey, you know, Barbie, I really appreciate your game, but you know, something I've noticed is that there isn't accurate representation for male bodies. Is there any update on how this may be amended in the future? Thank you so much. As opposed to saying, Barbie, you lazy lady, you haven't added this and I hate you. Like, obviously she's not going to listen to that. Like, I think people have to examine the way that they're saying stuff, especially on Twitter specifically, where players feel like they're very anonymous and that their words have no consequences. And that certainly isn't the case. You always have to remember that regardless of when, if you say something nasty or you say something hateful, there will be consequences at some point. And I think it's important to always think twice before you post something and to really think, is this going to be helpful? Is this going to help the situation? Is this going to hurt somebody's feelings? Is this going to, you know, clarify something, or is it just going to cause issues? Because at the end of the day, if your intention is solely to post stuff with the intention of hurting other people's feelings, you need to take a break from the internet and reread Royale High's rule book and rules of conduct. Because some of y'all on Twitter, Royale High community, some of you guys clearly don't adhere to the Royale High rules, and you gotta read it again, because I think you guys forgot. But anyways, with that in mind, there's obviously a lot to the situation, and it has to do with a lot more societal pressures and imaging that isn't just solely, you know, attached to Royale High. It has to do with outside factors as well. But I feel like in order to be a proper, you know, game that understands that there's various people that plays your game and to represent people appropriately, I think there needs to be an understanding for what players want and why it's important to them. And it's not just like them demanding stuff, it's because of an actual valid reason that has to do with representation and understanding in a game. And again, if you're a dress-up game, the whole core of dress-up is to be able to, you know, present yourself and to express yourself. And if players can't accurately express themselves in the game, they're not going to play it. Because, you know, if they are like, oh, I don't see myself in the game. Same issue with the POC hairs in the game. If players don't feel like they can be seen, understood, and heard and depicted in a game, they're not going to want to play it because they're like, well, this doesn't feel like me. It doesn't feel like I'm understood. And that, I feel like, is where the main issue lies at the moment. But anyways, let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section below. Do you think that this needs to be reworked? Do you think it's fair that they're saying it's too hard and that they can't do it? Let me know what you guys think. If any of you guys are 3D modelers, feel free to let me know in the comment section the process for resizing these things. I would assume it's primarily just stretching them out in Blender and like changing the X and Y axes slightly, and then potentially retexturing if there's open parts or if it looks weird. But let me know in the comment section, because at the end of the day, I'm not a 3D modeler and your insight would be very helpful. Anyways, thank you guys for watching, and I appreciate if you made this far in video. I will see you guys next time. Bye bye!